Welcome to Late Reviews. As you might have guessed from the title, this is maybe a bit of a controversial video, but I can't help but wonder why people like the movie Flow that much. And I might just live in a bubble, but judging by the reviews I've seen online, judging by the ratings it gets on the review sites, it's scoring really well. People love this movie. I've seen people place it among the top 4 movies of the decade. Sometimes even like the favorite movie of the decade. Of course, we are only around halfway through, but still, that's a lot of praise. A lot of praise for this movie that I don't get. So this is not just me being a contrarian, because actually I've been thinking about this for a while. I wanted to make this video for a long time. I haven't really had the time to film this. It's been there ready to be filmed. My script has been ready for more than a month. I just don't really have a proper setup at this point. I hope I would have a better camera and everything, but no, this is what I have to deal with. This is what I have to work with. So for now, yeah, it's a bit chaotic, but I wanted to talk about it before it gets even less topical. It probably isn't even running in any cinemas anymore, but I still wanted to talk about it because I think it's quite curious. I find it quite curious why people love this movie this much. So first, what do I think of the movie? Actually, I think what I should mention is that at the time I watched it, I lived in the country where it's from. And the people I talked to who had seen it were also from that country, were also living in that country. So even those people, they would have sort of the patriot bias of wanting to like something that suddenly blew up, but they didn't. None of the people I talked to liked the movie that much and tended to share the same opinion as I did. What we could agree on, the main appeal of it, which is also sort of a flaw, which I will get to, is of course that it's quite visually stunning. The craftsmanship is often what's emphasized, that how lifelike these animals look, how great these animals look, how beautiful the landscape is, though of course much of the time that's not much of a landscape, but the animals themselves behave lifelike in a lifelike manner. They communicate through body language and through sounds. Of course, they're not able to speak with each other in a comprehensible manner, but they can communicate. And of course, you can argue that there are some broader messages here. And that's also that why this animated movie maybe has this mass appeal. It's not in any language, so it can be enjoyed by anyone, essentially. It's very naturalistic. It's very speaking to our core way of communicating, of understanding each other. I think some of those things, of course, that's quite fine. I don't hate the movie, I just don't find it amazing. And also I think it's quite nice with all these allusions to a precursor society, if you will. It reminded me a bit of Adventure Time in that sense, that you can see that, oh, okay, there was actually a civilization here before. A civilization of humans, probably. And they're extinct. Yeah, or at least something happened. So all these cities are abandoned. I really appreciated the Venice scene. I think that's a really good looking scene. And there are some good scenes in this movie. And it did make me giggle. It did make me smirk a few times. Maybe I have laughed out loud once during watching it. So I didn't hate it. I just wasn't blown away by it. So the reason why I wasn't blown away by it, I find it ultimately quite boring, quite dull. Not a lot happens in it. And unless you really fall deeply in love with the characters, which I didn't, there's also not much investment. You might want them to see them make this journey. You might find some of them more cute than others. And although I do adore cats, I'm a big cat person, I just don't like cats enough for that to be like enough for me to stay immersed throughout the whole film. So I did find it ultimately quite boring. I found it quite uninspired. I honestly don't think the story does much. You could argue it's a typical children's movie, a family movie, in that it doesn't try to achieve much. It's more just an event of some animals on a boat trying to find a sanctuary in this drowning world. It's essentially, as you've probably seen it, it's essentially the experiencing the flood. They're experiencing a flash flood, which just gets worse and worse and worse, and of course, it reaches biblical proportions. And it's about them making it and figuring out how to work together despite their differences. You could argue that this movie is quite relevant at a time where, of course, a lot of countries are not really getting along despite the differences. A lot of people are not getting along despite the differences. And I think that's also why maybe some people, especially people who are more focused on humanitarian issues, social issues, might find more resonance with this movie because, of course, oh yeah, it just speaks to those values that, yeah, we should work together. We shouldn't be worried about cultural, religious, or ethnic differences. We all function together. But to me, that's like, yeah, that's kind of a sweet thought, but it's not really enough for me to like the movie. I did a lot of thinking and I came up with these 5 ideas, reasons why I think people like the movie so much, why it resonated so well with a lot of people. And there's a lot of overlap between them. I will try to keep them separate. And they are escapism,
escapism,
being different, being sweet, being beautiful, and animals. And I'll start with escapism. I think it's no surprise that we are living in trying times with a lot of uncertainty about the future, about the immediate, about the long-term future, with wars and conflicts going on. A lot of people are struggling just to make ends meet. We're not living in the best of times. And this does affect our taste in movies. It does affect in what we create and how we artistically express ourselves, how we decide to artistically enjoy things. Of course, things do change over time, but one example we can look at is how the 90s, a time of relative abundance, relative certainty, was a time where there was this idea that, well, now we were at a time of peace, of democracy, of prosperity. And what movies did we get? A lot of them were really soul-searching movies about trying to find an identity, and honestly, just a lot of very, very pessimistic movies. And sometimes, of course, you do get also in times of trouble, you get movies about poverty, about these things. But another example I can bring up is how the Great Depression gave birth not only to sound cinema, to spoken cinema, to audio film, whatever you'd call it. It also gave birth to the genre film. And this was because the audience, people needed escapism. They needed to be able to go in and just indulge in something, to forget how terrible things are outside. So they established these conventional forms, these conventional rules for film, so people were not too surprised going into a movie. And these movies were often about abundance, about joy, things that were quite far from the reality people lived. When you are living in these times that are, for a lot of people, very, very, very tough, we do like, there's at least a draw to movies that make us escape for a brief moment. And Flow does fit into that category. It's beautiful. It's about sweet animals. It's very, even the word flow and this flow aesthetics of it's quite appealing in a way. So I understand why it would appeal to people. For that reason, that it does offer some of this joy of escapism that you can enjoy in movies that can be quite, well, what you're seeking from cinema. It's also doing it in different ways than how a lot of movies today offer escapism. We don't have as many comedies, especially not as many good comedies. We don't have as many, especially a lot of these animated movies are more geared towards children and families in certain ways that are not really, that follow sort of the same genre forms. We don't get too many things that are giving us escapism while also trying and testing the conventions a little bit, and Flow does do that. It does give us a chance to just have a sweet moment, some laughs, some joy, some time with these cute animals, and yeah, people tend to love animals. But at the same time, this argument sort of falls flat upon closer scrutiny, because the entire movie is sort of an allegory of climate change. That human civilization is gone, is collapsed, is over. And even the animal civilization, the animal world is collapsing. It's over for them as well, at least throughout most of the movie. So it doesn't really make us escape this idea of impending doom. And of course, for some animal rights people, for some people who really care about animals and the idea that humans won't be the end of Earth as we know it, that might be nice. That, yeah, we might have climate change, we might have human-made catastrophes, but at least something lives on. At least the animals live on, that they escape human tyranny or something like that. I can see how that could work for some. I'm not really sure. I would put my bets on that being why people would enjoy this movie, that at least animals survive the apocalypse. But I think, and now I might be spoiling it a bit for you, that the movie is so optimistic that it still functions as escapism, because the ending of it, the tidal wave, the water resides, subsides, things return to normal. They survived climate change. They survived this catastrophe, whether human-made or not, whatever is caused by it, they survived it. And of course that speaks to some optimism about, hey, maybe, okay, yeah, we can maybe get out of this. Things may not be as messed up as we think they are. In that sense, it can function as escapism for people who are really worried about climate change, who are really worried about these things, that actually it ends on a positive note, so it's not too bad. And the same thing, another theme of it is, of course, the movie has a lot of themes reflecting on racism, on xenophobia. These different animals, they are of different species, different ethnicities, cultures, races, whatever word, of course, perfectly not racist anymore, but from different backgrounds, so to say. And they have to work together to overcome this catastrophe. There's no way of doing this alone, and you're also trapped, except for the dogs, you're trapped with only members of other species. You're not trapped with anyone you are in the in-group of, so to say. So you have to create this new community, and they managed to pull it off. They managed to create a community together, despite their differences, and use their differences to their advantages. So even though it does deal with some quite heavy topics of course, racism, of xenophobia, of these other things, it does it in a way where, again, we're still overcoming the challenges. We see how one big bird is ostracized for caring about a cat more so than the flock. And it's not even that it cares more about the cat than the flock, it's that it decides to feed the cat instead of giving the food to the flock, so it's left behind. And now it has to make a family with these new people, and it works well in this family. They do work together. So these topics, these tougher topics that might at first glance not be escapism, because we're still dealing with troubles, with conflicts we know in the real world, whether it be climate change or racism. Well, I can't say I experience racism, but it's something people experience. We are still able to overcome them. And there's a positive note. In that sense, it can still be considered escapism, because yes, it might deal with some things, but it deals with them in ways that are inspiring, optimistic, positive, ways we may not usually think about these topics. At least some of us may not usually be so positive and optimistic about them. The movie does offer not even an answer to it, because things just solve themselves more or less. It doesn't really prove an answer to it. It just that things happen naturally in a nice, lighthearted way, and maybe that's what resonates with people. So what else is there about the movie? Well, it's different. Let's talk about that. These days we're grown accustomed to cinemas being packed with superhero movies, action movies, horror movies, of course also the occasional Disney or Pixar film when it comes to animation. And yes, there of course are also still romantic dramas and that sort of thing. It's not really that we completely lack diversity in what we can choose from. It might arguably be less than before, but we do still have some diversity, some range. But even then, Flow arguably does stand out. It stands out in having a very different visual style, potentially also a different thematic style than other animations and cartoons, although it does use the same themes but differently. And the style, the choice of not having any dialogue in it, of course, so in a way it resonates with more people by not having it in, and it's also in a way another hurdle to overcome. How can you communicate these emotions without actually any speech, any dialogue? And the movie does get away with that. It does convey emotions through body language, through motion. So it does pull off these things. And as such, it can feel like a breath of fresh air. Instead of going for this, a lot of movies today try to use CGI to be as lifelike as possible. Rather, this movie tries to use all its creative skill, all its visual output, visual style, to create something that looks very lifelike, but not realistic. So it still wants to be a cartoon. It still wants to be a very obviously animated movie, just one that's done very stylishly and one that has all the realism through how the animals interact and emote and everything. Not so much through just looking like it could be a real animal out there. And that, of course, also makes it stand out in the choices it made. It's not a complete animated cartoon like from Pixar and that sort of thing, but it also it's not over in the complete CGI realism. In that sense, it's sort of in between in a way that is quite interesting, and that I can see how it's appealing, or at least it's a breath of fresh air. And the movie, the art style, the art direction, the whole, of course, there's the Venice scene I mentioned before, but a lot of the decisions they made in this film, it feels like it didn't come from a studio, but came from the heart of an artist. That this was made by real people with a real vision, doing what they wanted to do, not what they thought would make them the most money. So it feels genuine, it feels honest, it feels real. It feels like something you normally don't get in the cinema. At least that's what you could argue. But here's actually where I will disagree, and I might take a lot of flack for this, but I don't find it that original. I don't find it that unique or that different. I can understand the argument that we don't have as many movies like this anymore in the cinema, but if you go back 15, 20 years, we had a lot of movies like this. This would not have stood out as much. And visually, I actually think they might have made a mistake by making it as natural, as lifelike as possible. Because yeah, it's technically impressive, especially with quite a small budget, for the movement to be this flawless, for the animals to behave actually like how these animals should behave. I know that they went to the zoo to observe these animals to see how they behaved, and to try and capture their emotions, their motions, their movements as closely as they could, and they did an excellent job at doing that. But aside from some of the architecture, aside from a few of the scenes, a few of the visuals, I would argue that the movie does end up being quite bland in its visual expression. When you think about it, do you remember movies that are incredibly beautiful, or do you remember the ones that are different, are creative in the visuals? I think, for me at least, when I think back on animation that stood the test of time, cartoons that stood the test of time, they either have a really, really good story with great characters, or they stand out for having really interesting visuals, really interesting visual style. And here, it sort of falls flat because it doesn't. It has a beautiful visual style, but not a very creative one in the sense that it doesn't really try to do much different than just be portraying something, as might be a bit brutal way of saying it, but it's sort of the way AI acts, that it, if you tell it to visualize something, it gives you a picture perfect version of it. But people don't necessarily want that. Sometimes people want a Picasso or a Dali or a Super Jail. We don't always just appreciate things because they are picture perfect, because they are beautiful landscape paintings or something like that. That is one quite rudimentary understanding of artistry. I think I'm being a bit too harsh here, because of course it does have some interesting visuals, some personalized visuals, some expressing some creative thought by some of these, like the Venice of it, some of the skylines in the background, some of the tall mountains. It's not that it does everything by the book, but by and large I think it comes a bit too close to that to, for me, still be a bit bland. This kind of rudimentary or flat style of visuals that's in some ways not too inspired, that itself will mean that it doesn't really have the unique factor that might set it off. Of course, some of the architects, some of the scenes might have enough of a visual characteristic or character to make it stand out and to make it a movie that can stand the test of time. I would highly doubt that it will stand the test of time, because it's so bland in many ways, in my opinion. It's sweet and bland. Even the whole silence aspect, yeah, it's kind of nice, and I think a lot of people applaud for doing that, but it's not even the first film to do it. If I'm not mistaken, one movie that pulled off all this before, and which was much more creative in its visualization, in its creative outpower, decided to visualize this world, and this world they created for it, would be The House of Baskerville. But that movie seems to be mostly forgotten. Before writing this script, I don't know when I last thought about that movie, but we used to get these movies, and even the movies we got that are, in my opinion, much more creatively advanced and interesting and entertaining than Flow, they tend not to stand the test of time. So I don't think Flow will stand the test of time, and that's also why my skepticism when people talk about it as being the best movie they've seen this decade. Why I felt compelled to make this video, because in some ways I don't understand how it's that different from at least the Pixar I grew up with, the Pixar I'm familiar with. One thing I think really resonates with people is that it feels like it wasn't created as part of some content plan. It feels free, it comes off as genuine, as sincere in its output, in its vision. Even if I'm not too particularly fond of that vision or that, but at least it feels sincere. When you really compare it to other animated movies we get today, I think that's why, like, the options we have for animated is really low, and a lot of it is maybe for smaller children, or there's always these things that they have to go through, the same, you sort of get used to the same sound design and everything. Here Flow does stick out. And it becomes a problem when you do factor in that essentially almost all our animated movies today come from two studios, Pixar or Disney. And Disney owns Pixar. So when an animated movie comes from the outside, a real outsider comes into the market with a small budget and creates something that is impressive, that it is impressive, then that might attract more attention to it. That people will flock more to something that's different, to something that is foreign in this way as well. That is trying to do things differently, even if I argue that these things that it does differently have been done before, just a bit in the past, and much more so in the past, even by studios like Pixar. Of course, we just don't get that much anymore, so that might be why people really flock to this. That it is beautiful, it is nice. It is nice to look at. It is pleasing to the eye, and it is pleasing to the eye in a way that other animated movies might not be today. It has a different character. I'm not even gonna say it has more character. I am not also a big watcher of animated movies. I don't really follow much about what's going on in the cinema when it comes to animated movies. So I watch trailers every now and then. I see what people post. So I do understand the style we have these days, but I'm also not too competent in being able to compare this with everything else we're getting. But we can even try and take that point further, because a lot of people see praising this movie. It's not like the list is full of animated movies. The list contains all the, more adult and non-animated movies out there. So it's not just that they are comparing that this array of options is only limited to animated movies. It is that generally speaking, people might feel that there's not a lot of originality in cinema, that there are not that many options. I do somewhat disagree here. I do think that there is a problem with this, that we are not having as many options, that there are types of movies that tend not to get made that much anymore, or that studios might keep it too safe often, but we do still also have a lot of creativity out there. We do still have studios, we have directors, we have people who award creativity, people who sponsor it, who want more of it. On the top of my head, 3 movies I watched recently, newer productions: Dream Scenario, Nosferatu, and Sinners. All 3 movies, Sinners to a less extent, but still I would argue Sinners also is sort of genre-defying, that they are doing things their own way, that these movies just are showing that we still have the capacity to make creative movies and sell creative movies. Of these 3 movies, I think Dream Scenario did not perform as well. I think I just love it quite a lot, so I do like to bring it up. But we do still have the capacity for the option for watching different movies, but we still have it within a limited frame. So when it comes to animated movies, we tend not to have this many options. And when it comes to movies of a different creative sort, when it comes to creative sci-fi that is not just Star Wars, we do only have so many options. So people praise them more when we get them. So that's also why I understand when we do get one different animated movies, people flock. When we do get one different action horror movie like Sinners, people flock. When we do get something like Nosferatu, people flock to it because it's different. I'm not a big fan of Nosferatu, but I can at least admit, yeah, it's different. I can see why people would flock to it. There is this craving for not just watching the same genre-conforming movies, but we also have those options. I can see why this would be encouraging people to see Flow, but I don't think that alone can mean that Flow is good or will stand the test of time. I talked about most of the things. I mentioned that people like it because it's beautiful, like it because it's stunning, like it because it's different. They like it because it's sweet. It's sweet escapism. I mean, that's sort of in the same, but these are sweet animals. They are animals that I guess people want to spend time looking at, and they would like to cuddle them, they like to spend time with them in real life, they like to enjoy screen time with them. People do enjoy animals, they enjoy sweet animals. It is something that it's a crowd pleaser for most. So I think that alone also is a selling factor, that if that made the exact same movie with mute humans, as weird that would have been, I don't think it would necessarily sold as well or been that popular. It's a cat movie with a lot of other animals as well, so it of course appeals to animal lovers, and a lot of humans are animal lovers. That's the animal aspect, I think, why that helps sell it. And yeah, I'm getting to the conclusion here. I'm very curious to look back at this movie in 5-10 years and see how it holds up, because I don't think it will hold up well. It will not be like considered a catastrophe or anything like that. I also don't think it's a catastrophe. I just think it's a bit bland. On Letterboxd it has 2.5 out of 5, which is to me like fairly average movie. It does some things very well, but it just was completely, honestly, I would say it felt uninspired to me. It felt hollow, felt tame, felt boring. Might also just not be the type of movie that usually appeals to me, so of course that it might also be. But then again, like, you can show me a silly cat movie if it has with animals, if it has enough funny things happening, I would probably love it. So I can't be in the right audience. I'm just not the people who swallow this up. I need a bit more than maybe what most to be entertained by it. And I'm not trying to take away anyone's experience with this video. I don't want to take away anyone's enjoyment. If you think this is one of the best movies you've ever seen, well, okay, sure, cool. I just don't understand it. What I try to outline here is trying to understand it. And I think I did that quite well. We talked about how it's different from the cinema, from what else is in the cinema. We have limited options in the cinema. It has an aura of creativity and sincerity. It offers escapism through things we like, through nice little animals, through being sweet, through being beautiful, through having easy solutions to difficult problems, and also by making us ignore the problems of our world. It comes out at a time of turmoil. It comes out at a time of turmoil, and where people are really, in many ways, desperate. There's chaos in the streets, or at least some people would say there's chaos in the streets. There's war across the world, might even be heading to another war soon, yet another war soon, and nothing seems to end. Things get more and more expensive. People find it more and more difficult to just make a living. And then this movie comes out, and it's just a breath of fresh air, I guess, or people can relax a little bit with it. I understand why people can like that. And if you're one of those people, then cool. I probably could talk more about it, but this is what my thoughts boil down to. So if you have any other reason why you think the movie, why people like the movie so much, why it works so well for a lot of people, if you think I'm a complete lunatic, rambling lunatic that has no idea what I'm talking about, I'm also curious to hear your suggestions why I am wrong. I could be wrong about some of the ideas I have here. You can try and prove me wrong if you disagree. I'm not even sure how to end this video. If you like this movie, sure, good for you. So my attempt was to use this movie as an example of the time we live in and the type of movies we see, of what we want from cinema, of what we want from movies. That's what this video aimed to do. It aimed to try and answer a question I had to myself, or I not understanding why people love this movie so much, and answering by trying to understand why it appealed to people. So it's not a deep researched analysis, but it is me trying to analyze why it was successful. And I hope that at least was interesting to you. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, whether or not you agreed with me, maybe you can at least understand some of the ideas I have why this would appeal to people. I normally don't make videos exactly like this. Normally don't film, well, I guess that's actually not true. In the future, I'll no longer be filming in such shabby conditions. I'm also working on some game reviews, normally review movie franchises, or at least just a few movies I like. I'm currently working on the Terminator franchise. If that sounds interesting to you, you can watch that. So yeah, please comment if you are disagreeing with me, or I don't know, if you have some other thoughts. Subscribe if you want more videos about movies. And yeah, that's it. Ciao.